FEMA and the Red Cross, these government agencies, have all these lists that they put out about supplies that you would need, the average person would need for general preparedness. And while these lists are pretty good, they're a good starting point, they are pretty basic. When you think about these different government agencies, they look at a national level or a state level, even a community level, and not an individual level. And that's where we need to be looking. So regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your geographic location or your personal finances, it's hard to say that things aren't getting a little bit crazy these days. It's hard to say that there aren't certain situations that we should be preparing for. Now, the items listed in this video today, the recommendations from the Red Cross, are really just the basics, the sort of the starting point to preparedness. Over at the bugoutlocation.net, we go into quite a bit more detail as far as water storage, as far as food storage. We've got courses set up over there. We've got resources, preparedness resources to help you dig deeper into each of these. So if that's something you might be interested in, I'll make sure and leave a link below in the description, and you can head over there and check that out. So the first one I've got here is water. And regardless of what situation you are talking about, water is your lifeline. Even if nothing happens at all, water is something we need on a daily basis. So the Red Cross recommends 1 gallon of water per person per day in your family. And if you're preparing for a few days, that's really not that hard to store that much water. If you're preparing for a few weeks or even a few months, that's where the challenges come in. There are a number of different storage solutions and places you can store water. You've got the water bricks that are low profile. They're easily stackable. You can put water in 2-liter bottles. You've got 5-gallon or 4-gallon water jugs that they sell at Walmart. And with the storage containers, if you are not able to store a large amount of water because you live in an apartment or a small home, or you've got a really large family, also remember that filling up the bathtub is a quick and easy way to get a lot of water. They have the water bobs, and a few different companies make these liners that you can put in your bathtub and store 50, 60 gallons right there. So if you do have a little bit of lead time and you are able to fill that up before the water gets shut off or before the grid goes down, that is a great way to add to your water storage. So with these different options, it should be, for the average person, it should be pretty easy to store 50 gallons of water or so. And again, depending on the size of your family and depending on the length of the situation you're planning for, that could be the amount that you need, or it could be severely lacking. And this is where the alternatives come in, like trying to find water, understanding where water is available in your neighborhood, understanding where water would be available in your house. You've got the pipes in your house. You've got garden hoses. You've got it, if there's anything in your neighborhood as far as streams, lakes, rivers, things like that, where you could have that emergency water source, you need to think about those things as well. Now, finding water is really just part one of water procurement. You need to be able to clean that water as well. And this is where water filters come in, and understanding what each filter will do. I've got a few courses over at the bugoutlocation.net that go into everything that I'm talking about here today. So I'm not going to get into detail about what certain water filters will do. But just understand that some of these, like the Life Straws or the Sawyer Minis, these types of filters are going to get certain things. But if you want chemicals, heavy metals, and things like that, you're going to need a much more expensive and a much more durable water filter. So think about that as well. If you're not able to store the amount of water that you feel like you need to sort of think outside of the box with this and figure out what your alternatives might be. So the next one that the Red Cross recommends here, and a lot of these emergency agencies do, is having cash on hand. This is really important because if the grid goes down, if the electricity is not available, and you need to go out and get more supplies, the ATMs, the credit card machines, all of these things may not be working. And if there is something that you need to go out and get, you will need to have cash on hand. It's also recommended that you do carry cash in smaller denominations, smaller bills. That way you are not going out to get, say, a case of water bottles or something like that, and all you have is a $50 bill, and you have to give that $50 bill up for that case of water. What I do is try to keep at least $50 in smaller bills in my wallet at all times. Having that cash on hand just gives you that ability to still make that transaction when all of the modern conveniences are down. The Red Cross also recommends non-perishable foods, and I believe their recommendation is anywhere between 3 days to a week. And non-perishable foods are basically anything that doesn't require refrigeration. You've got canned foods, you've got boxed meals, soups, freeze-dried meals as well. Foods that have a long shelf life and would be easy to make in a situation where the grid was down in some sort of disaster situation. If you have storage limitations, like I said, if you live in an apartment or a small home, the freeze-dried meals are a pretty good solution because most of those come in buckets and can be, just like water, can be easily organized and stacked and come with calorie-packed foods. Now, they're not the most healthy for you, but when you're thinking about canned foods and boxed meals and foods like that, they're not all that healthy for you either, but they are shelf-stable and non-perishable, so they are important to have in a situation where the grocery stores might be closed for a week or longer. Now, my personal recommendation when it comes to food storage is a week or so is just not enough. And now, again, this depends on how far you want to take things, but I would try to, at the very minimum, go for 30 days. So next, the Red Cross recommends flashlights and headlamps, and it's also sort of a kit that you can put together. I've got one that I made. I call it my Lights Out kit, which has quite a few of the things that the Red Cross recommends in it. And again, as being a prepper, a few more that they don't. But it's really important to have flashlights and lanterns, even candles. There are a lot of different options these days, but once the sun goes down, you are in the dark, and there are going to be a number of different reasons why you're going to want a little bit of light, whether that's just moving around the house or whether that's finding different supplies. It could be that the event or whatever caused this situation happens in the middle of the night. So you're going to need to be able to sort of get everything together, and doing it with a little bit of light available is going to help you out. Now, headlamps to me are far more versatile than a flashlight, and I probably have more headlamps than I do flashlights because you can put this on your head and you still have two hands to do what you need to do. So whether you are talking about a get home situation, a bug out situation, you're trying to work on things around the home, having a headlamp, you're going to have more options than you would by maybe putting a flashlight in your mouth and working on things. Headlamps are fantastic. And the lanterns will give you that all around. They will sort of fill up the room with light rather than it being directed light. So think about those things as you're thinking about how you're going to light the house or how you're going to light a room, how you're going to be able to see things once the sun goes down. And sort of along the same lines as this, that something that could go in your lights out kit are hand crank radios, shortwave radios. And these are important in the beginning of these disaster scenarios because you may not know what's going on, and you want to be able to get as much information as you possibly can. You can listen into the NOAA radio channels, the weather radio channels. You can get information from the government resources. But hand crank radios are important, and I think the hand crank aspect of this is important as well because if you're talking about a grid down situation, you want to be able to power that radio. And if you don't have extra batteries, which you should have, and we'll go into that next, being able to manually get that powered up is going to be important. And they do make, I've got the radio that I have is a Voyager crank radio, which has got a small solar panel on it, which doesn't do a whole lot, but it is something. It's got the crank on it, and it's also got batteries. So this radio has got 3 different options. So as I alluded to, the next one here is batteries. And these days we have so many more options than we used to. And batteries, we should have extra batteries for all of the different supplies that we have. So if we have that crank radio that takes batteries, if we have different headlamps and flashlights that take batteries, if we have ham radios that will need batteries, we need to make sure that we have extras of those and quite a few of them. Rechargeables are the way to go these days. They make AA rechargeables, AAA rechargeables. They make larger lithium ion batteries that are rechargeable. So if there is a possibility to get batteries that are rechargeable for some of these different supplies that you have, that's the route I would go. Now, that's not to say if you can get some other batteries that aren't rechargeable, that's not to say don't store those as well, but make sure you have those batteries and the rechargeable batteries in your lights out kit. Now, the one caveat with the rechargeable batteries is you're going to need to be able to recharge those. So that is where solar comes in and being able to have energy to recharge those batteries. And one way to do this is the power banks. And you've got the Jackeries, you've got the Opez power bank. I have one of those that works pretty well. I've got my DIY solar setup that I did a while back that I could use to recharge some of these batteries. Having the batteries and having the ability to recharge some of these batteries and having those power banks, I think, are one of the most essential things to have when it comes to preparing for something that could be a few days or could be a few months. Okay, so moving on, the Red Cross also recommends including first aid supplies in your emergency kits because the immediate access to medical care could be limited, could be non-existent after a disaster or emergency. So it's important to have some of these supplies that we might need for immediate care, minor injuries, even traumatic events where going to the hospital may not be an option, at least in the immediate. You've got the minor injuries like the cuts and abrasions, burns, things like that, the bandages, the antiseptic wipes, the adhesive tape, all of these smaller first aid supplies that we may need to use on a daily basis. And then you've got the trauma supplies, which with the trauma supplies also comes learning how to use these, but these are important as well because there could be depending on the disaster situation, there could be life-threatening situations that we need to deal with. Having these supplies like the chest seals, the SAM splints, the tourniquets, things like these are great, but you also need to know how to use those. Along with the first aid supplies, you've got to think about medications as well. This could be prescription medications, and this could be the over-the-counter medications. In any sort of disaster situation, you want to make sure infection and things like that don't become an issue. Diarrhea because your diet may be changing, things like those that may become an issue, you need to have ways to combat that. So there are over-the-counter medications that can be bought. There are pain relievers, there are stomach ailment relievers, and just a lot of different things that we need to think about. So it's not just the Band-Aids and the tape, it's the over-the-counter medications as well. So having a well-prepared first aid kit, and a few of them, like I said, is really important. So the next one here is something that quite a few people really don't think about, but is absolutely important, especially if you're talking about a natural disaster or a get-home situation, and that is important documents. And this could be identification cards, this could be insurance, financial policies, medical records, contact information, legal documents, anything that you would want to be able to grab at a moment's notice and either take with you or possibly give to somebody that if they need to, if it's a search and rescue situation. I also recommend having pictures of all your family members. You can do this on your phone if you like, but I think it's also important to have physical copies of these pictures. If it is a search and rescue situation, you may want to give a picture of a family member to one of the authorities so they know exactly what they are looking for, and make sure it's an up-to-date recent picture. It's also important to put all of these important documents in one place, whether you're talking about a folder or in a safe. I personally have a lot of my important documents in a fireproof, waterproof folder. It could be a house fire, it could be flooding. There are a lot of different things that could go on, and paper can get damaged very easily. So it's important to keep them as protected as you possibly can. Now, one more that I've got here that a lot of people don't think about because the advancements in technology, a lot of people don't have paper maps anymore. A lot of people don't even know how to read paper maps anymore. You've got your cell phones where you punch in the address of where you're going, or shoot, you can even go to the search engine and just type that in, and it'll guide you through the whole process. But it's important to have paper maps, local paper maps of your area, because you just never know when you're going to have to get from one place to the other, and you're not going to have the cell coverage. Maybe the cell towers are down and you don't have the GPS, and you need to find the safest route from point A to point B. And to do that, you would need paper maps. If it is a situation where you do need to bug out or evacuate, paper maps are going to give you a good idea about what sort of terrain you may be having to cover, some of the safest routes that you may be able to take, some of the alternative routes that you may be able to take other than the highways. But maps are definitely something that is overlooked a lot, but absolutely something that is important to have in your disaster preparedness kit or kits all around the house. But they are definitely something that is very important. This is just a basic list. Like I said, over at thebugoutlocation.net, we've got courses and resources and go into a lot more detail into this stuff than I did in this video, and that the Red Cross really does on their website. They don't focus on the larger scale disaster type situations too much because there are a lot of variables that go into that after you're talking a few weeks. And as preppers and in preparedness, that's sort of what we go into, because it is important to think about those different things and to be able to navigate those situations. Because while the mainstream media and shows like Doomsday Preppers have given preppers a bad name, it's not out of the realm of possibility that something like that does happen. If you've got anything that I didn't mention in this list, any items that you think people should have as far as basic preparedness or even beyond that, let me know in the comments below and let everyone else know. But with that, that's it for today's video. Appreciate everyone joining in. If you like the video, make sure and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we do more videos. But with that, take care and prepare, everyone. We'll talk to y'all later.